What if you suddenly found yourself standing on the battlefield of Hastings in the year 1066, with a wooden shield in your hand, a heavy helmet pressing down on your head, and thousands of warriors screaming as they charge toward you? Before we step deeper into this thrilling what-if scenario, take a few seconds to smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you won't miss the next historical adventure. Only do it if you are truly ready to march into the chaos of the past. Now, let us step onto the field. The air around you is thick with smoke and sweat. The ground shakes beneath the stomping boots of men who've trained their whole lives for this very moment. You hear the deep, booming sound of war horns and drums. It feels like they are pounding inside your chest. You do not need coffee anymore. Fear and adrenaline have already turned your blood into fire. You glance to your right and left, seeing men who look just as terrified as you, some muttering prayers, others gripping their axes so tightly that their knuckles turn white. The Battle of Hastings was not just a fight. It was the moment that would decide the fate of England itself. On one side stood King Harold II and his Anglo-Saxon warriors, men defending their homeland with everything they had. On the other side, William the Duke of Normandy, leading disciplined Norman soldiers hungry for conquest and glory. And you, somehow, are stuck in the middle of it. The question is, what kind of soldier would you be? Would you stand firm in the shield wall, bracing yourself for the first wave of Norman cavalry? Or would you look for the nearest bush to hide behind and hope no one notices? Don't worry, history is full of both heroes and cowards, so you would still be in good company either way. This is not just history. It is your story now. And the choices you imagine making here could mean life, death, or even a twist of destiny that changes the course of a kingdom. Before you can swing a sword or raise your shield, you need to understand why this battle even happened. The year is 1066, a year that school history books call one of the most important turning points in English history. But let us strip away the dusty textbook vibe and imagine it from your perspective, standing right there. England at this time was ruled by King Edward the Confessor, who, let us just say, was not the best planner for the future. He left no clear heir to the throne when he died. And that created the medieval version of a Netflix drama series, betrayal, ambition, and lots of people claiming, no, actually, I should be king. Enter Harold Godwin's son, the powerful Earl of Wessex. He was crowned King Harold II right after Edward's death, and he claimed that Edward had promised him the throne. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Because across the sea in Normandy, Duke William said, hold on, Edward promised me the throne, and Harold even swore an oath to support me. That crown is mine. Oh, and just for fun, a third guy joined the party. Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, who thought, well, since I am technically related to the old Viking rulers of England, I should take a shot too. So in 1066, England was not just in danger, it was the medieval equivalent of a house party gone completely out of control. 3 kings, 1 throne, and thousands of warriors marching to decide the future. Harold first rushed north to fight Hardrada at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where he somehow won an insane victory. Imagine fighting a giant Viking army and actually beating them. It was like winning the Super Bowl after playing 3 back-to-back games without rest. But here's the problem. While Harold and his men were still exhausted and limping home from that northern battle, William of Normandy landed in the south with fresh troops, cavalry, and archers. It was like showing up to a boxing match after you would already gone 10 rounds with someone else. And that is exactly where you find yourself now. A soldier in Harold's tired but determined army, facing William's hungry Normans on the fields near Hastings. So, the stakes, not just land, not just gold, but the entire fate of England. The question is, standing there, shield in hand, would you feel proud to defend your king? Or secretly wish you were home farming turnips instead? So now, let us put yourself into the boots, well, more like rough leather shoes of an Anglo-Saxon soldier. You are not some Hollywood hero with a shiny sword and a six-pack. You are an ordinary man, probably a farmer pulled away from his fields, handed a weapon, and told, congratulations, you are fighting for England now. Your gear is heavy and awkward. The shield in your left hand is a big wooden circle, painted with patterns that might have looked cool at the village fair but now feels more like a door you ripped off your house. It weighs nearly 15 pounds, and your arm already aches just from holding it. In your right hand, you might carry a spear or a battle axe. If you are really lucky, like winning a medieval lottery, you might even have a sword. But swords were expensive, so most men like you had whatever could be forged cheaply and quickly. Your helmet is made of iron, pressing down on your head. There is no soft cushion inside, so every time you move, it feels like someone is knocking on your skull. And armor, don't expect shiny plates. At best, you are wearing a chainmail shirt that weighs about 30 pounds, clinking with every step. At worst, it is just thick wool or leather, which is about as useful against arrows as wearing a hoodie in a gunfight. Training, forget modern boot camps. Most Anglo-Saxon soldiers were not professionals. They were part of the FYRD farmers and townsfolk who were called up when the king needed an army. Sure, some elite warriors trained regularly, but you probably learned how to swing an axe by chopping wood, not by fighting Normans. And yet, here you are, lined up shoulder to shoulder, expected to hold the famous Anglo-Saxon shield wall. Now picture this, you are standing in that line, shields overlapping, creating a wall of wood and iron. The man to your left is sweating so much it drips down his beard. The one on your right is muttering prayers under his breath. And you can't help but wonder, will you hold your ground when the Norman cavalry slams into you? Or will your knees buckle before the first lance even hits? The reality is brutal. The life of a soldier here is not glorious. It is exhausting, smelly, terrifying, and probably shorter than you would like. But at the same time, there is a strange pride, knowing that you are part of something bigger, that your shield is literally protecting the man next to you. So what do you think? Could you carry all that weight? Stand in the shield wall and fight like your life and your kingdom depended on it, or would you tap out and head for the tavern instead? Let us pause for a second and think scientifically. What does it actually take for a human body to survive a medieval battlefield? Forget the Hollywood version where soldiers fight all day with perfect stamina. The truth is, biology and physics were often your deadliest enemies. First, food and energy. An Anglo-Saxon soldier burned thousands of calories just by marching and holding heavy equipment. Imagine walking miles with 30 pounds of chainmail, a helmet, a shield, and a weapon. By the time you even reached Hastings, your body was already in survival mode. Most soldiers ate bread, porridge, cheese, or dried meat good enough to keep you alive, but not exactly the fuel you would want before fighting armored cavalry. No protein shakes, no sports drinks, just hope that your last meal was not spoiled. Now, wounds. Here's the hard truth. If you were hit by an arrow, a sword, or a spear, your odds of survival were not great. Without antibiotics, even a small cut could turn deadly from infection. Soldiers often carried scars, festering wounds, or lost limbs that became permanent disabilities. If you were unlucky enough to take a deep wound, the best medical care was usually someone pouring wine on it, saying a prayer, and hoping the gods liked you that day. Then there is the physics of the shield wall. When cavalry charged, the impact was not just dramatic, it was a force of hundreds of pounds slamming into you. Even if the spear missed, the shock could break bones, knock you off balance, or crush you under your own comrades if the line collapsed. Scientists today would compare it to being hit by a moving car, except you are expected to stand there and take it. And let us not forget exhaustion. The human body simply is not built for hours of continuous combat. Studies show that after just a few minutes of high-intensity fighting, muscle fatigue sets in, your vision narrows, and reaction times slow. Yet here you are, expected to swing an axe over and over while someone else is trying to stab you. So the real question is not just whether you would be brave, it is whether your biology could even keep up. Would you have the stamina to hold the shield wall for hours? Could your body recover from the wounds without modern medicine? Or would science itself betray you before the Normans even got the chance? History books often describe the Battle of Hastings with numbers, strategies, and political consequences. But to the soldiers who stood in the mud that day, the world was far more mysterious. For them, war was not just flesh and steel, it was fate, gods, omens, and magic. Imagine the night before battle. Some of your comrades claim they saw a comet streaking across the sky, the same one we now call Halley's Comet. To you, this was not just a rock flying through space. This was a sign from the heavens. Was it a blessing for King Harold, or a warning that doom was coming? Different men argued different answers, but all of them believed it mattered. The Anglo-Saxons carried charms and crosses, whispering Christian prayers for protection. At the same time, some still clung to older pagan superstitions, little amulets of iron or carved runes, tucked under their tunics, meant to ward off evil spirits. The Normans, too, brought their faith. They marched under papal banners, convinced that God himself had sanctioned William's invasion. If you were there, would you put your faith in the shield wall, or in the invisible shield of divine favor? And then there were the tales of warriors who fought with supernatural strength. Stories spread of Viking berserkers who could enter a trance, feeling neither fear nor pain, biting their shields and howling like wolves as they charged. Standing next to one of those men, you would probably wonder if he was blessed by Odin, or just really needed therapy. But here's the truth: belief was power. Whether in the Christian God, the Old Norse gods, or the power of a lucky trinket, these faiths gave men courage to stand when logic said they should run. Science might say it was adrenaline, but to the men at Hastings, it was destiny written in the stars. So ask yourself, if someone handed you a talisman before battle, a carved rune, a cross, maybe even a rabbit's foot, would you grip it tight and trust it could turn aside a Norman spear? Or would you laugh, toss it away, and rely only on the weight of your sword? The horns sound, the shouting grows louder, and suddenly, the battlefield explodes into chaos. You do not just see the Normans coming, you feel them. The thunder of their cavalry rattles the earth, shaking through your boots, rattling your bones. The shield wall you are part of is your only hope, and yet in this moment, it feels frighteningly fragile. Then the first wave hits. Arrows whistle through the air like deadly rain. You hear the sickening thud of one striking the man next to you. He drops, and you feel the gap open in the line. Do you step forward to fill it, or do you hesitate, praying someone else will? The Normans advance with discipline, archers first, cavalry second, infantry behind. You raise your shield, and the impact of a lance rattles your entire arm. Your knees buckle, but you push back, pressed against the men beside you, shoulder to shoulder. If one man breaks, the whole wall could collapse, and you know it. The noise is overwhelming, shouts in languages you do not understand, horses screaming, steel on steel. Somewhere in the madness, a Norman knight swings a sword so close to your face that you smell the iron. Your helmet rings as a blow glances off, leaving your ears buzzing like a hive of angry bees. And then there is fear, the kind that crawls into your gut and won't leave. Do you embrace it, let it sharpen your senses, or does it paralyze you? Some men go wild in this moment, hacking and screaming with adrenaline. Others freeze or even collapse, praying for it to end. Which one would you be? It is easy to imagine yourself as the brave hero, but history tells us most soldiers were ordinary men, simply trying to survive the next few minutes. Maybe you would be courageous, standing tall in the line, or maybe you would think, forget this, and crouch behind a bigger guy, hoping he blocks the spear meant for you. Hey, no judgment, we have all thought about cutting corners at work, this one's just more fatal. But one truth unites them all. In the chaos of Hastings, death was never more than a heartbeat away. Here's where the what if really gets wild. Imagine for a moment that in the chaos of Hastings, you managed to do something extraordinary, something that history books never recorded. Maybe your spear finds its mark and strikes down a Norman knight, or perhaps you even land the blow that takes out William the Conqueror himself. Pause and think, what happens next? Without William, does the Norman army crumble, or do his commanders take charge and fight on anyway? History is fragile like glass. One crack, one tiny change, and the entire shape of the future might look different. If William had fallen at Hastings, England might have stayed Anglo-Saxon for centuries longer. The French language might never have blended into English the way it did. No Norman castles would dot the countryside, no doomsday book to record the kingdom's wealth, no wave of feudal lords reshaping society. The English we speak today, filled with French words like government, justice, and beauty, might sound completely different. You might be speaking a version of English closer to German, or maybe even something unrecognizable. And what about Europe? Without William's conquest, England might not have become as tightly connected to the politics of continental Europe. Perhaps England would remain more isolated, more Viking-influenced, maybe even resisting the Catholic Church's grip for longer. In short, your one lucky strike could have rewritten not just English history, but the history of the Western world. But let us be honest, are you really that lucky? More likely you would swing your weapon, miss entirely, and then get clobbered by the nearest Norman horseman. Don't feel bad. Statistically, that is how most soldiers' stories ended. Still, imagining that you could tip the scales of history with a single brave or clumsy moment makes this thought experiment so fascinating. So, the question stands, if you had the chance to alter the fate of England with one action, would you take it, even knowing you might die instantly afterward, or would you play it safe? Survive the day and let history run its course. The battle ends. The shield wall breaks. Men scatter, and the field is littered with bodies. Blood mixes with mud, and the cries of the wounded echo long after the clash of steel has gone silent. As you stand or stumble across the aftermath, the reality hits. England has changed forever. King Harold II, struck by an arrow to the eye, at least according to legend, lies dead. His warriors are cut down or fleeing, and William of Normandy, once just a duke across the sea, now claims the crown of England. What began as a day of desperate defense has ended as the birth of a new dynasty. For the survivors, life would never be the same. Imagine dragging yourself back to your village, telling stories of the horror and the chaos. Maybe you limp for the rest of your life, or maybe you carry a scar that your grandchildren will stare at in awe. But more than wounds, you carry the memory of knowing that you stood on the field where kings fell and empires shifted. The legacy of Hastings was massive. Norman rule reshaped England. New castles rose to dominate the landscape. Laws changed. Land was taken and redistributed, and even the language began to evolve. Overnight, the island became a fusion of Saxon and Norman, Anglo and French. The echoes of that day in 1066 still ripple in the words we speak and the culture we inherit centuries later. And you, if you had survived, would forever be part of that legacy. Not a name in the history books, perhaps, but a thread in the great tapestry. The kind of anonymous soldier whose sweat and blood became the foundation for a new England. So ask yourself, if you limped away from Hastings alive, would you feel pride that you had witnessed history, or bitterness that your world had been torn apart? And so, your journey as a soldier at the Battle of Hastings comes to an end. You have stood in the shield wall, faced Norman knights, wrestled with fear, and even imagined how one action could change the destiny of nations. From sweat and mud to myths and legacy, you have lived through one of the most decisive battles in English history. But here's the thing, this was not just about the past. It was about you stepping into history, feeling what it might have been like, and realizing how fragile the fate of a kingdom can be. Thank you for walking through this what if with me. If you enjoyed this dive into the chaos of 1066, hit that like button, subscribe for more journeys into history's greatest turning points, and share this video with someone who loves epic battles. Now I want to hear from you. If you had been at Hastings, would you have stood bravely in the shield wall, tried to run for your life, or maybe even attempted to change history itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I would love to see how you think you would have survived or not. And finally, let me know what other moments in history you would like to explore next. Should we sail with the Vikings, march with Roman legions, or face the mysteries of the medieval plague? The choice is yours. Until then, remember, history is not just something you read. It is something you can step into, one story at a time.